Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. Yes, it is a little late for a New Year's resolution, but here's one that's better employed late than never. Take better care of your garden tools. And it's not just keeping them clean. On today's episode of Garden Basics, Debbie Flower gets into the hows and whys of properly maintaining your garden tools, and that includes storage and sharpening advice. And yes, the proper way to clean your tools. Plus, we have tips for choosing quality gardening tools to begin with. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots, and we'll do it all in under 30 minutes. Let's go. It's wintertime. Have you taken care of your tools lately? Your outdoor garden tools. Let's find out what you should be doing. Debbie Flower is here, our favorite retired college horticultural professor. I think that's one thing, Debbie, that people do scrimp on is tool care. They may tend to leave their tools outside.
Yes.
And may not clean their tools when they're done. And if they are cutting tools, they may be, let's say, a little behind as far as sharpening those tools.
I'm guilty of that last one, I have to say.
I find it fun. It's stress reducing.
Yeah, just to sit there and...
Yeah, to get out the bevel and just start...
Shave your blades.
Yeah, shave the blades. Yep. Let's talk about the importance of why we want to clean tools. I'm cheap. I want to buy a good tool to begin with, and I want it to last.
Right. You do. And tools are made of metal in general. The good tools are. And metal can rust. So you don't want that to happen.
Right. When you have mud encased on your metal parts of your shovel, for example, that can lead to rust.
Yes, it can. And any contact with other things like the floor can allow moisture to be trapped. A concrete floor, moisture moves up through a concrete floor if it's a pad on the ground, and that can cause the tips of a shovel to rust.
Well, that brings up a very good point then, that as far as storing your tools, even if you're storing tools indoors, then what do? Hang them?
Hang them.
Yeah.
Hang them high, Harry.
All right.
Or you can make I've seen patterns for making tool storage devices that the tool sits on the ground, but it's the handle that touches the ground, not the metal blade.
Is that a good thing?
Yes, it's better than the other way around.
Okay. Handles, now, you can get them in wood, you can get them in fiberglass. I kind of lean towards fiberglass because there's less care involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wood handles get wet, and then you can get splintery, they get rough, you can get splintery, and so they may take some care. If your handle has gotten to that point, or if you inherited some, and as an aside, you can sometimes find really high quality tools at estate sales from people who have had them for decades, like you, bought them very good high quality tools and then kept them for their lifetime, and now that person is selling them. So
it's probably their children that are selling them.
That's a possibility as well. And they may not be in the best of shape, but you can bring some tools back to life. I have some that I got from my parents' house. So the handles are kind of rough sometimes, and they're wood, and so you need some fairly fine grit sandpaper, 120 or 150, and sand it all down till it's very smooth, and then you use boiled linseed oil to soak those handles for about 15 minutes, rub off the excess, and that should revive a wooden handle.
Do you boil linseed oil, or does it come boiled?
It comes boiled.
Oh, good.
That's what you buy, yes.
All right,
yes, that would be...
I would get in big trouble if all of a sudden I was filling up a good pan on the kitchen stove with linseed oil.
Yes, and yes.
Yes.
It would not be a good thing.
All right.
No, you buy boiled linseed oil.
Okay, but that's for wood.
That's for wood.
Wood. Are there any specific tips for fiberglass handles?
I don't know any. Do you?
You just keep them indoors.
Yes.
Basically. And like you say, hanging them upside down makes sense. And I like to hang them so that they're completely off the ground.
Yes, me too.
With hooks. It's a neater look. Mm-hmm. It doesn't take up that much space if you got the right hooks. Let's get back to cleaning the muck off
of
the tools, especially shovels. Man, oh man, if you're dealing with mud or caked on dirt, it can take a while to clean it. So I've just gotten into the habit of when I'm done for the day with the tools, I turn on the hose on the jet nozzle, rinse off all the metal parts, and if that doesn't get everything, I have a barbecue grill brush that
really stiff one then,
that I have dedicated to the garden tools that's hanging there in the garden tool shed, and I will basically clean the rest of the gunk off that way.
I don't use a brush as much as my hand. I put my hand on the tool and rub that mud and with the water running over it, and it comes off. I have one shovel that's particularly annoying in that the part you step on is a rolled over piece of metal, and on the back of the shovel, mud gets caught in that roll, and I often have to take another tool. It's often a hori-hori, which is a lovely Japanese designed digging device, and get in that roll to scrape out the mud. But it works, but I have to pay attention to doing that. My family is not as conscientious about cleaning the tools as I am, and so I kind of have to be the tool inspector. Say, no, you didn't get that. Take that back. Redo it.
For credit, yes.
Yes.
Right. A flathead screwdriver can do that job, too.
Very good point.
I would think that the thickness of the hori-hori knife might not fit in that roll.
Right. In some cases, it doesn't.
Yeah, but a hori-hori knife is really a great garden tool to have. It looks like a 10-inch dagger with a serrated edge on one side.
Right.
With the shape of almost like a trowel.
Right. So you can dig with it.
You can cut with it. And
you can cut roots when you go to plant.
Yeah.
You can dig weeds out quite effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And it lasts a long time, unless your wife loses it in the compost pile.
Well, I was going to say I have two hori-horis now, although I think I'm back down to one because I had a wooden handle, and I lost it. And so I got another one as a Mother's Day present or some such. And then I eventually found, when I got the second one, I painted the handle yellow.
Good.
Because I happened to have yellow safety paint around, and I needed it to be more visible. So that one I have not lost. And then I found the first one when I was working in the yard, but then immediately lost it again. So if I ever find it again, I will take care of the handle, I will sand it, and then I will paint it, and then I will oil it.
I use yellow electrical tape.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And put it in several spots along the green handles of the lopper. Why manufacturers create green handles is beyond me.
Right.
They disappear.
They do. Absolutely. Yep.
So, yellow electrical tape. Usually, if you go to a big box hardware store, you can usually find several different colored rolls of electric tape in one package and just buy those. And you can use the yellow and the white and the lime green or whatever.
The ones that are going to show up in your landscape.
Yeah,
yes.
That you can spot from a distance. That's the problem, is you can't see them unless you're up close if they don't have any sort of contrast to them.
So when you find them, they're often in bad shape. We've talked about the wood, but the blade itself can also be in bad shape, and that can take some washing first, wash and dry, and then cleaning as much of the rust off as you can.
How do you do that?
Well, I would try, I can't say I've done it, I would try steel wool to get it off, and then you need to wash it and dry it again and oil it. And commonly used for oiling tools is used motor oil, crankcase oil. And so at school, we had a big tub that had sand and crankcase oil in it. And when the students were done and had washed and dried their tools, they would just dip them in and out of this tube, in and out of this bin of crankcase oil-soaked sand. And that gave it a nice coating of oil on the blade of the tool so that it would not rust.
I bet that bed was a surprise to any wandering cat that came over.
Well, it was in the shed, and it was in a bucket, so right. I don't know.
Okay. Motor oil. Okay. Oh, that would be easy to do. I see that North Carolina State University has some recommendations about using the steel wool, like you mentioned, or sandpaper if your tools have developed rust. And what about for those tools that may have sticky sap on them, like your pruning tools?
Yes, mineral oil will take that off. Your hands as well. If you've been handling a conifer, maybe your Christmas tree, something with sap on it, oil takes that off, and mineral oil is recommended for tools.
One of their recommendations for cleaning sap off is my go-to device for just doing a good general cleaning. It's a foaming bathroom cleanser in a spray bottle. You know, the one with the scrubbing bubbles?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does a job, and it disinfects as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's something to think about, especially if you're going to do a series of pruning, is if you're, let's say, removing your fire blight in winter, you want to disinfect your tool between cuttings.
Do people still do that?
I don't know.
All right. Well, I know that they have conducted experiments here locally, and the former farm advisor for Sacramento County was deliberately trying to get that fire blight pathogen to transfer to his pruners to another part of the tree, and he couldn't do it. And it's like...
There was another professor down at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo who tried to do that for years and years and years, and he couldn't do it. Fire blight in general enters through the flower.
Right.
Purportedly, it can.
Yeah, purportedly it can. But if you concentrate on making cuts for fire blight, like 12 inches below where you see damage,
yes,
chances are you're cutting into healthy wood.
In healthy wood, right.
Yeah.
So you're not picking up the bacteria which causes the disease.
Right. So that's one way to avoid the disinfecting part of it.
Alcohol can also be used for disinfecting if you need to do so. I was at a commercial grower and they were taking cuttings, and they had created this special device that the workers wore on their hands, and it contained alcohol, and when they wore it on the same hand, they used the pruning tool, and they could press a button and it would flood the blade with alcohol, and then they'd make their next cut.
Well, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. It was a cool device. It wasn't a lot of work for the women. It was mostly women. For the workers to use, but for the person to create it, that would be a lot of work.
One of the more popular disinfectants that people tend to use is bleach. And that's not such a good idea.
That's pretty hard on the metal.
It's exactly. If you leave any of that bleach on there, it can corrode.
Bleach is a pesticide, and it's a very toxic one to humans. It can hurt your skin and eyes. I don't want bleach around my garden.
I guess whatever you use, you should thoroughly dry the tool before you put it away.
Yeah.
So that would be important. So another use for the old hair dryer.
Oh, there you go.
Or just take the one that's up there. They'll never know. All right. Can coating the blade itself and any of your cutting tools or digging tools, a metal blade portion, with a light oil afterwards? You talked about motor oil for cleaning, but what about like a 3-in-1 oil for just maintaining it?
3-in-1 oil is good to use at the jaw points, the movement points, the screw that holds the two blades together on a pruning tool. Yes, 3-in-1 is excellent for that.
We're glad to have Smart Pots on board supporting the Garden Basics podcast. Smart Pots, it's the original award-winning fabric planter. It's sold worldwide, and Smart Pots are proudly made 100% in the USA. Smart Pots come in a wide array of sizes and colors. If a frost or freeze is in the forecast, moving your frost tender plants that are in the Smart Pots that have handles make them easier to move closer to the house for added warmth, or you could even move them inside for the winter. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful fabric containers. And don't forget that /Fred part, because on that page are details of discounts when you buy Smart Pots at Amazon. If you want to see them before you buy, Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers and select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. To find a store near you, visit smartpots.com/Fred. Have you taken a look at the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter yet? There's one that accompanies the Garden Basic podcast. It's a deeper dive into what was discussed on the podcast, along with more great gardening information. We call it Beyond the Basics. In the current edition of the newsletter, we filled the gaps of this week's podcast. From Tuesday's episode 164, we have more information in the newsletter about how to store various fruits and vegetables after harvest. We have winter strategies for controlling codling mothworm problems in apples and pear trees, and a picture of what a professional orchardist apple or citrus stem clipper looks like. From today's podcast on garden tool care, episode 165, we delve deeper into how to control rust on tools, maintenance tips for garden tools with fiberglass handles. We have pictures of bypass and Anvil pruners, and we have Felco's instructions for cleaning and sharpening your pruners. You can find a link to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter in the podcast show notes, or at farmerfred.com, or by going to substack.com/gardenbasics. Think of it as your garden resource that goes beyond the basics. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter, and it's free. Please subscribe and share it with your gardening friends and family. The Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter. Well, here's a scenic bypass for you. You talked about the screw holding together the two blades of a pruning tool. If you buy quality tools, they'll have that where you can take them apart, put them in your vise, clean them, and sharpen them.
Yes.
The inexpensive ones don't have that ability
Correct.
to take apart. And by the way, we're talking bypass pruners, not Anvil pruners.
Yes. And also if you have an inexpensive pruning tool and you go to sharpen it with a metal file, often the blade just disintegrates.
Right. That's why people like Felco and Corona make special sharpening stones for that very purpose. Watch a video. I'll put up a link to a video where they are demonstrating the correct way to sharpen the blade of a pruning tool, either hand pruners or loppers, because there is an art to it.
Yeah, and the number one mistake I have seen, because we did this as a lab in a couple of classes when I was teaching, the number one mistake I have seen is that the tendency is to make the sharp edge at a 45-degree angle. Make it very short and sharp. Mm-hmm. And that means you wear it out immediately. First two cuts and your sharp edge is gone. What you want to do is go at a 20-degree angle, which is a very shallow angle, right, if that makes sense, and work that sharpen the blade that way, and then do a flat on the back. There's only one side to the blade that is sharp. Right. The other side is flat, and clean the burrs off the back. But you want it to be about 20 degrees, which is a very shallow. The tendency is to go really up on a high angle and make a short, sharp cut, but it's much it doesn't last. So you want that 20-degree angle for sharpening.
You want to get into bypass versus Anvil pruners?
If you want to, it's your show.
Do. Okay, why not? If you go to just about any good nursery or hardware store and you go to the wall of pruners, chances are the majority of them are going to be Anvil pruners because they're cheap, because they sell a lot of them. The purpose of an Anvil pruner escapes me, other than if you're in the cut flower business and you want to stop the flow of sap out of a cutting, well, use that Anvil pruner because the blade is hitting a flat plate, and that's going to crush the end of the cut.
Right. If your Anvil pruner is very sharp, it won't crush it. There are a few people I know who love their Anvil pruners, and it is because they feel they can get closer to their target location on the branch to make the cut. But they are the kind of people who walk around with a sharpener in their pocket and sharpen that blade between cuts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the Anvil pruner is good on deadwood.
Yes.
That's about it. Deadwood and cut flowers.
Yes. As you were saying, an anvil is one of my grandfathers was a blacksmith, and he had an anvil. And an anvil is a flat metal platform on which he would hammer hot metal to make horseshoes. So the Anvil pruner has a flat metal on one side surface, flat metal surface on one side, and then the blade just comes down onto that anvil at a 90-degree angle and hopefully cuts the stem, but more often than not crushes it.
What happens if you use an Anvil pruner on fruit trees and you're just pruning your fruit trees? No? You don't want to bite on that?
I don't know what you're thinking of.
What I'm thinking of is if you use an Anvil pruner to do fruit tree pruning, for example, you're going to be crushing the ends more than likely of what remains where you want a bud to grow. And it's going to make it more difficult for that tree to grow and reproduce correctly.
Right. The Anvil pruner, unless it's kept incredibly sharp, tends to crush stems, and that does not lead to good growth for plants.
So what you want are bypass pruners.
Right.
For 99% of what you're going to be doing in the garden, a good pair of bypass pruners, a good pair of bypass loppers are all you need.
Right, and bypasses means that the blades pass by each other just like a scissor.
Mm-hmm. Try to find bypass loppers, though. Those are the long-handled pruners, and most of those are going to be Anvil pruners as well. So be careful what you're shopping for, and they won't necessarily say bypass or Anvil.
No, they don't use those words. You have to look at the blades.
Right. Make sure the bypass pruner has two. When you open and close a bypass pruner, you can see that the blade bypasses that bottom arm.
Yes.
Whereas with an Anvil, it's going to come right down on that middle of that plate.
Yes. And you'll see that Anvil plate on a Anvil pruner.
Right. So bypass pruners. Now, some people say, well, I have a problem, squeezing the loppers closed to get a branch. Here's a general rule of thumb. If the branch is less thick than your little finger, use hand pruners. If the branch is thicker than your little finger, but less than your thumb, use loppers. You get more tension, more. If the branch is thicker than your thumb, use a pruning saw.
Okay. You can look up, there are, inch recommendations for that, but you always carry your hands with you, so it's a lot easier to check.
Yep. Yeah.
And the other thing about getting a good cut, that when I watch people and I train people, they don't typically don't think of this, is to get whatever you're going to cut as close into the jaw as possible. So when I say jaw, I mean where the two blades come together. So not using the tip. The tendency is to cut with the tip, but you get more power if you put the branch you're going to cut all the way back into the jaw. And sometimes if you flip the blade, the pruning shears over, cut from the bottom, then that works better too. And I think it has to do with the anatomy of the hand and where your fingers and thumb are. But those are a couple things to try if you're trying to cut something and it's just not working.
And if you have a cut flower garden, or if you just want to harvest tomatoes or peppers or citrus, you probably want a pair of needle nose pruner snippers.
Right. You don't always have to bring out the big guns. You can have some small, and the snippers are nice. They're smaller, but they have more, as you say, needle nose tip. And so you can get into places that you can't get into as easily with regular pruners, regular hand shears.
Our USDA Zone 9 problem here is harvesting mandarins in the wintertime and getting a little bit of the stem to go with it. And there's so much foliage around there, it's tough to get in there with a pair of bypass pruners and get that little quarter-inch of a stem.
And only that little bit, yes.
Yeah. And so getting in there with the snippers, with the needle nose, it makes it a lot easier.
Yes.
But and they have a wide variety of purposes, too. Do you have a favorite pair of pruners?
It's usually the one I've just sharpened. I have about 10 pair.
Well, don't we all?
Yes.
Yes.
They're in the car. They're in the house. I have a bucket of them in the garage. Yeah. So mostly Felco and
Corona?
Yes, Corona. And they have replaceable blades, which I can't say I've ever done, replacing the blades, but it means that I can unscrew them, as we were discussing earlier, and take them off to get the blade. Difficult to sharpen the blade all the way down to that jaw.
Right.
Corona makes a nice little tool that I do. I have a couple of them that I do like that gets close to that jaw. But if you really want to sharpen the jaw, you take them apart.
What does this tool look like?
It's a flat. It's only about 3 inches long, 4 inches long at most, and it has a red handle. It says Corona, and then it has a metal blade that is a file, and it's angled.
Is it two-sided? Is like one side rough and the other side smooth?
No, it's just one-sided.
Okay, so it's not like a general sharpening and then a finishing side. Okay. You can find the sharpening stones that do that, which are ovals about that same length, 3, 4, 5 inches long, and maybe an inch wide or so, that taper on either end. But there's 2 distinct sides to them.
And are they stone rather than metal?
I'll go look.
Okay, because stone often requires you use moisture, and that can be a problem in transmitting plant disease.
I'm back! All right. So, here we have the Philco 903 sharpening thing that's... Oh, I see what I did.
Package.
In order to hold it in the card it came with, which has very distinct instructions on the back, I put a piece of thick, looks like duct tape.
No, that's metal.
Yeah, it's metal.
Yeah, metal is best for pruning tools because there are stone sharpeners to sharpen blades, but they require moisture in the form of water, and that can lead to transmitting diseases like bacteria and fungus in plants.
According to Philco, the correct angle is 23 degrees.
23. Okay, I stand corrected.
Oh, not by much. They're saying anywhere from 20 to 30, but 23 is optimum.
Get out your protractor.
Yeah. On this card that came with the Philco sharpening tool, sharpening stone, I don't know what you call that, sharpening...
file.
Oval file. Okay, that's good. It says it has 3 functions: sharpening like a sharpening stone, strengthening, and honing like a sharpening stone or a sharpener. Follow illustrations for full directions. Clean a dirty sharpening tool, Fred, by scrubbing it with water with added scouring powder.
Baking soda would work well for that.
Yeah, so keep your tools clean, like this.
Even your sharpening tools.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, fine.
Okay. Also, sharpen the tips of your shovels.
Yes, exactly. People forget that shovels are cutting through dirt.
Yes, and roots and whatever else is down there, hitting rocks.
And even your loading shovels, like your square-faced shovels, because sometimes that's the only shovel you have, and you need to maybe dig for a border or something, and you want to use that. Sharpen that.
So other tools as well. If you do your borders by hand, that tool can be sharpened. But yes, it makes it so much easier to dig if you sharpen the tip of the shovel. I was just amazed the first time I did it.
Yeah. Take care of your tools, and they will last a lifetime for your children to sell at estate sales.
Hopefully, they'll probably have their own set by then.
Or they're not into gardening. All right, we're going to go take care of our tools. Thanks, Debbie, for all the good advice.
Oh, my pleasure, Fred. Thank you.
Garden Basics comes out every Tuesday and Friday. It's brought to you by Smart Pots. Garden Basics is available wherever podcasts are handed out, and that includes Apple, iHeart, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, Google, Podcast Addict, CastBox, and Pocket Casts. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and leaving comments. We appreciate it.